Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the panel, for being able to come here and talk to us. And please, in the room, have mercy with me, because I think all of these people are interesting to listen to for at least half an hour. And we only have half an hour for the whole panel, so I have to be short in my questions, and I'm going to ask for short questions on a very important topic, respect for the people. I think it's clear that in this panel we want to address the social and the employment challenges we are facing at the moment. Also underline perhaps the victories we have already made, but as you know, as politicians, people are never going to vote for the victories you have done, but for the plans and the promises you make for the future. But we did some. We reacted to COVID-19 first. We reacted to the war in the Ukraine, to the energy crisis. And of course, this all in the context of this present climate task change we have to challenge. So the challenges are huge. We have fought hard to bring proposals to the table and to make them a reality. We pushed for the short-time work scheme. We pushed for the child guarantee. We pushed for the minimum wages, for the Porto Social Summit, for the upcoming directive on platform work. So there is quite a lot being done. And when I say being done as a result of our collective action. This is never a task of someone specific, but because we pushed all for this. But there is more ahead of us, and I have interesting panelists. Looking forward to the proposals they bring to the table for the next 30 minutes. And I start to my complete left-hand side, to Christophe Glageot. Coming from France, I think the question, which is quite logical, how can we ensure that the vulnerable will not suffer from the rise of the cost of living? And can you perhaps elaborate a little bit on taxation of the super profits, because there in France you really take the lead in the debate. Christophe.
Yes, thank you. We are in France fighting to recuperate the windfall profit, but we do not do that alone in our country, but it's now our common will, our common commitment. It's in the resolution we will adopt in a few hours. And why? Just because Europe is not facing only an energy crisis, but Europe is getting into a social crisis, and very strong and deep social crisis. And we need to finance a massive plan to support people and to support small enterprise. And we can't accept, as socialist and social democrat, that people have to choose between eating and eating, when some firms make profits with no reason, with no creation of any kind of value. So yes, we want to recuperate the windfall profit. All the windfall profit, it's not a question of 30% or 40%, 100%, all the windfall profit. And I will add, it's not only about energy firms. It's also, our friends from S&D Group this morning said, it's also about banks. It's also about digital firms. It's also about maritime transport. Every firm who made windfall profit in COVID crisis or this energy crisis must give it back to the society to finance support for the poorest. That is our common fight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you also for taking the lead in this fight. And you see that when you start a debate, you get followers when it's a good idea. Huh? So thank you for that. Sita, just being re-elected as the chair of the Best Women, so congratulations for that. We have a fierce fighter for true gender equality, we know that. What would be your main points and calls to push for women's rights in Europe in the years ahead? Sita.
Thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here, and I'm also happy that Philip Corder is here, that we started to work together to make Europe a gender-sensitive Europe long years ago. And I should also mention Paul Nyrup Rasmussen, who has been doing a great partner in this fight. So shall I have a clap hands for these great guys as well? Of course, I'm convinced that PES has been the trailblazer for women's rights all across Europe, with ripple effect outside of it too. So now in these trying times, we cannot and will not stop. Nobody can stop me. As Antonio Guterres told, Zita is the engine. I have to go with you alone, because we can win the next European election if we are on the board, women and men, together. Of course, a long-standing call of PES Women has been to have a formal council configuration of EU gender equality ministers. This would signal that gender equality is a priority for the Council, and the increased cooperation in EU legislation is much needed. It would be one of the most effective ways to achieve gender equality, alongside tools that we have already in place, such as the EU Gender Equality Strategy, for example. And that's thanks for PES. Helena Dalli is the Commissioner for Gender Equality and LGBTIQ rights. We made it thanks for the PES leadership and all the activists around Europe.
Thank you, Sita. Thank you. I announce Esther now as the Deputy SecGen, but perhaps in a few weeks' time, or shouldn't I talk about this yet? Okay. Esther, as Deputy SecGen of the ETUC, since the beginning of the COVID crisis, you have been campaigning for wage increases in Europe. What does the minimum wage directive do for your movement? Sorry.
So I want to begin, Agnes, by thanking you for your leadership and your courage and working with the trade union movement to bring that minimum wage directive over the line. That minimum wage directive is going to put money into the pockets of the hardest working people in Europe. I've been a minimum wage worker. It was the toughest work I ever did, the hardest day's work, and you get the least amount of pay. And I think that directive, Agnes, is a legacy worth claiming. The other important part of that directive, of course, is exactly as Ivana Bacik said. It's to make sure that workers can join a union without fear and bargain for their fair wage, because everybody knows the only way workers can get a fair wage is by collective bargaining. So thank you, thank Commissioner Smith, and thank everybody in the labour movement for working together to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, it has been a collective effort of which I'm proud, I must say. Maria, people all across Europe are seeing their purchasing power decrease. With this high inflation rates, even if you have a good collective agreement, it's difficult to keep up the space. And what do we think, what do you recommend we will do to reverse this trend?
In fact, we are in face of a great danger of inflation and something worse, which is deflation. The root cause of this starts with the aggression to Ukraine and then the blackmail on energy made by Russia. So energy is at the root of these inflation risks. And I believe that, first of all, we need to have a clear vision that the best way to ensure energy security and security as a whole for Europe is to go to green energy. If we are relying our societies and economies on green energy, we also provide more security for everyone. This is on the long term. The problem is, how can we get there? This is the problem of the transition. And how can we make sure that all citizens, they can come along? Look, I would be in favor of targeting subsidies to the most vulnerable groups and to the most vulnerable SMEs, because we cannot have resources for everything. So we need to be selective and we need really to subsidize those more in need. This is the first thing. Second, the implications for food prices needs to also be under control in the food chain. And finally, the housing prices. And this has to do with the interest rates decided by ECB. So we really need to put the right pressure, and in the end, the safety net will depend on the wages.
Yeah.
That's why collective bargaining and now the minimum wage are really a very important safety net.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this. And then the last speaker in the panel in the first round, Robert. He's, by the way, my neighbor in the plenary of Strasbourg and Brussels.
Love this neighborship.
Yes, a very nice neighbor, I must say. It's always the same group of people who are affected most by the crisis. It's no matter what kind of crisis, but it's always the same group of people who suffer. And I think the question is, how can we as progressive take the lead of protecting those people who are suffering most?
Yeah, you're right, Agnes, and we all feel that the winter is coming, that not only as a season of the year, but also politically. And we as progressives, we need to deliver. It's our obligation. We need to have courage and strength and solidarity to deliver. Because if we do not deliver, it's a fatal ground for all the populists, extreme right populists. And I come from Poland, and I can tell you a lot what happens when we, as progressives, as Democrats, do not deliver. 30% of the territory of my country is LGBT-free zone. Poland has the most barbaric legislation concerning termination of abortion. Just a few months ago, a 30-year-old woman was one of the first victims of this barbaric legislation. This happens when winter comes to one of our member states. This happens when we are not in solidarity. And I tell you that, coming from the country of solidarity, of this historic movement which have torn down this wall, not only the Berlin Wall, but this iron curtain which we as social democrats, we should never build again. We are the best in building the bridges, so we should build the bridges.
Okay,
and this is the challenge for us.
Okay, thank you. And I think we can do this. I think we can do this. We can build these bridges. But let's now go into the second round of questions, and I start again with Christophe. You talked about what you're doing in France, but how do you think Europe's role in employment and social policies could be? How can we, from the European level, bring Europe closer to the workers?
I will give just one example, very concrete. And I have a question for you. Do we still want to be the Workers' Party, the Labour Party?
Absolutely. I do.
If yes,
Yeah.
we have to fight about the work on the platforms. It's a very symbolic issue, and it's not only because I love Nicolas Schmitt and not Emmanuel Macron that I say that. If we want to defend workers, we have to defend their status. And it's impossible to go on with this kind of work on the platform with no right, with just paying for a tax, with no protection. Slavery is not the idea for our century. So we have a good, an excellent socialist commissioner who put on the table an excellent directive to give rights to the workers on the platforms. And we have a president of France who is doing everything he can to block these directives. So we have to be mobilized to give rights for these workers and to show to everybody in Europe we are the Workers' Party.
Okay, and everyone who's doubting about what the president of France is doing should read into the Uber files, where it's very clear how much he was influenced by the lobby of the Uber platform.
If you say that, it must be true.
Okay, it's true, absolutely. I never lie, or hardly ever. Sita, second question to you. Can you perhaps dig a little bit deeper into the gender equality with a specific example? And then I'm thinking about the care strategy. It's employing many, many women, and the working conditions are not the best. What are your thoughts about that?
First of all, let's talk about the pandemic, which has been affected everyone, and especially those who has fewer resources. And of course, it is affected women and men differently. Women made a lot of the frontline job during the pandemic as cleaner, nurses, teachers, cashiers, and so many. Let's clap hands for them, because I believe this has been an invisible job and a very important job. But of course, these jobs are still undervalued and underpaid. Although we all rely on, of course, that's why we have the equal pay day and the unequal pay day, the 4th of December. I invite you all to be in the City Hall of Belgium, because the Zikant PES Women is going to do a great activity. But of course, let's see what type of other activity women did. We took a lot more housework and informal care than men did. And many working women quit and lost their jobs. And of course, switched to part-time, which means that they earn much less money. And of course, this has clear consequences. Telework can also be a trap for women, with while it promises more flexibility, unpaid work and exclusion can become even more invisible. PES Women is keep pushing for this message through our campaigns and positions. We need to continue to promote a feminist economy which values care for what it is, the backbone of society. And we need to include women in decision-making to make our voice heard. Too many of these women are not represented in the trade unions' top position or political parties. And of course, they are not on the most company or even hospital boards. So we need to promote their voices. We should be their voices, by the way. And here we also need to have a necessary conversation about the value of the work. I think it's absolutely crucial. Why should a woman who is lifting a baby earn less than someone who is lifting a brick stone?
Okay, thank you. Indeed, equal pay is very central for our political family, for also the trade union movement. So I'm now going through Esther again, asking you the question about expectations of workers for the policies we are making and pushing. What would be your idea of the main priorities at the moment? Perhaps the platform, perhaps the care sector, but perhaps you have other priorities, Esther?
I think that is absolutely essential, because in particular the iconic value of getting the directive to protect workers, respect for the worker, respect for the work that they do, by recognizing that this is a worker and that this is work, and that's critically important. The passport to nearly every single employment right is the fact that you're a worker and that you've an employer. Letting employers walk away from their responsibilities is a catastrophe. We also are very much welcoming the work of Helena Daly in bringing forward the equal pay for work of equal value, because exactly as the feminist groups here are saying, it's an outrage that caring work, that cleaning work is called low-skilled or no-skilled. Who are you kidding? This is highly skilled work and needs to be recognized as that and properly paid as that. But we can't stop there. We've a lot more challenges. We need to make sure that there's due diligence, that companies are held to account for what they do overseas, to make sure that we have our place in the boardroom. I could go on a long time, but just if my last 30 seconds, I can say, friends, we're going to be out on the streets in your town. We need you to join us because we're campaigning for the anti-crisis measures, we're campaigning for pay rises, and we're campaigning for a just society alongside with the other parts of the labour movement. So Agnes, looking forward to seeing you again and everybody else on the streets.
Thank you. I think this is indeed very necessary, not only to talk, but also show our face on the streets and form this progressive movement with other allies in the field. Maria, perhaps you've been active at the European level for quite a long time. I just thought perhaps can you give some reflection on, are we moving in the right direction, or should we say the previous commission did more than this commission? Inequality has risen up. How do you see, for the bigger scope, how do you see what we can do compared to earlier responses to the crisis?
Look, if we go back to the period of the financial crisis, and everybody here remember the big hit we could really see everywhere, I must say that we, as a political family, we could turn the tide. We could turn the tide by launching the European Social Pillar, which is setting fundamental social rights for all citizens wherever they are, whatever the job they have, and whatever the region they are in. And this was a major shift, and it is great now to have our new president played an important role in launching this pillar, but it was a full initiative of our family. And now we turn this into an action plan, and we combine these with more powerful financial tools. So we start seeing the difference during the COVID crisis, that's for sure, exactly with the SURE instrument, and then with the next generation. And now I believe that we are under test for the new phase, because the new phase is also a period where the risk of a recession is there, and we need really to cope with this risk with, again, stronger instruments, implementing the European Social Pillar, but also combining it with stronger European instruments, protecting citizens wherever they are.
Okay.
So this is my hope for the next period.
Okay, thank you. Indeed, there is a line from the Gothenburg Summit to the Porto Summit to now pushing for the further implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. Robert, to conclude. Someone has to conclude, sorry. My main question to you would be, once again, how can we prevent, how can we protect the most vulnerable group for paying the highest price?
Well, there are many of paying higher price, and I'm very happy that the name of this panel is Respect for the People, because we have still so many people living in terrible conditions. In Lithuania, almost 40% of people keep home inadequately warm. Where in Poland, 2 million people don't have access to the toilet. They don't have toilets. In many regions of our union, the unemployment of young people is 50%. Just a few days ago, we heard about shots in front of the gay club. 2 people were killed. Women in Poland, they're dying because of this barbarian legislation. Our obligation as progressives is to protect people, is to remember that we do not protect people when we do not respect the rights. In 2022, right-wing populists come and they take the duty. They take the duty which has terrible consequences. And we see them in Hungary, in Poland, we will see them probably in Italy. So it's our duty to remember that it's 2022, and women, for example, women, wherever they live, they should have equal rights. And it's a shame that we did not deliver this. This is still not the case, that women in Poland, they still go on the streets, they fight for the rights in 2022 in European Union, in the heart of the Europe, and it's shameful that we still did not deliver that. It's our obligation, it's our duty to protect everyone.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm not going to try to wrap up all these good proposals, but just end with this note. I think we have the good proposals on the table. We have the fighting spirit. I think we have the fighting spirit, we have the clever ideas, but I think it's also clear that we should build coalitions. And indeed, we should not only talk in this Brussels bubble. Important, we have to win the fight for the platform directive in the Brussels institutes. But I think indeed, if women in Poland take the streets to fight for abortion rights, we should be there. If trade unionists are going to take the streets on the cost of living crisis, we should be there. And I think if we really want to fight extreme rights, we should claim our territory, be there with self-confidence, with the good plans we have, and with the allies we have as a family. So thank you for this. And thanks to the panel. Thanks for the panel.
Thank you, Agnes. Thank you to all the panelists. Great job. Thank you, Mr.
Grazie,
Pedro.
Giacomo.